Hey, what's up? It's Nicole Brewster, also known as Coco. Thank you for tapping into the Elevate Him podcast, where we have tons of topics on how to support our men. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Nicole Brewster, also known as Coco. Thank you for tapping into the Elevate Him podcast. Tonight's guest with me, I'm super excited. We got Vincent Osborne, and his background story, I'll let him tell the story, but I'm really intrigued at the fact that you wrote a book. And when I first got in contact, we actually, had a conversation, and I had seen the title of the book, Suicide Notes. Now, right. My background, a little bit about, why and how I started Elevate Him was because my brother committed suicide about 10 years ago. And so that sent me through a whirlwind. It was a lot of pain, a lot of, I had no idea why. I had no closure. I still live in that, I've done some healing, but I'll never have closure or complete understanding of why. So when I saw the title, I initially, this is kind of a side note, but I kind of thought, are these notes from people who left that behind as they were going to do that? And I was like, that would be really interesting. But when I got a chance to get to talking to you and know you and stuff and your backstory, it was just the way you did it in your book was very poetic. And I'll let everybody hear from you what that's all about. But I just want to say thank you for coming on. I'm excited for you to share your story, and people can actually reach out and get your book. So let's just start. So how and what inspired you to write a book initially? What was your thought process that that's what you wanted to do?
Well, honestly, I was married for 8 or 9 years, close to 9 years. So I was married for about 9 years, and I found myself going through some pretty tough times. One of the main things that I realized is that I had a experience, and that experience just kind of took me to a place that was completely dark. It wasn't an experience inside my life that was helping me to move forward. And so because I was kind of stuck in that experience, what I chose to do was to express myself. I knew I needed to talk to somebody. I knew that I couldn't really relate with a lot of people. I knew that I couldn't really express myself directly. So what I decided to do was I took to poetry. I've always been a poet. I've always done poetry. But
did you always like writing? Of course, with poetry, but have you just always liked writing growing up?
I've always liked writing. Everybody in my family is an artist.
Okay.
Everybody in my family is an artist, and they're all very open. One of the main things that I want to speak of is that I grew up in Long Beach, California. Long Beach, California is a tough place. I went to an academy. I went to Jackie Robinson Academy. At Jackie Robinson Academy, one of the main things I learned is just the importance of friendship, the importance of communication. When I ended up going to Poly High School is one of the most popular football high schools in Long Beach, California. I remember I had a 10th grade teacher. And so my 10th grade teacher, my dad was always big on computers and stuff like that. So he was just like, hey, look, man, I got you a computer, take it to school, do your studies. So I went to school and I was like, hey, look, so at school, I'm going to start doing my studies. And I remember this one girl comes over to me and she's just like, hey, let me play on your computer. I was playing Street Fighters. And then, after I set it all up for her and said, yeah, you can play on my computer. I was trying to be as nice as possible.
Right.
And so, I was letting her play on my computer. And then, basically, I remember my 10th grade poetry teacher, she corrected me. She said, hey, look, you don't want to give all of yourself to a person because you want interest. And I remember the poem that I wrote after that. It was just like, okay, I'm finally starting to see how important it is for me to communicate how I feel as opposed to just saying,
Right. What it
really,
is.
really, yes,
Right.
of course, right. Saying it's not what it is, because that's very, very, very important too. And many times that's important. That's an important form of poetry. 2 days ago, I was, thinking to myself, and I had this epiphany, like, hey, look, I need to write right now. And sometimes I feel like that I gotta write right now. So I pick up my phone. I'm like, I'm about to write this poem, and it's so ebonic. It's just ridiculous. It's like everything about it was, I'm about to spell this out completely in a form that is going to be able to talk to the most open soul. And so when I did that, when I was like, look, I'm about to just talk to myself and say, hey, look, this is exactly what I need to do. I wrote those poems. It was 2 poems, and immediately I erased them on accident.
Oh, damn.
Yes. So that's kind of one of the things that I started to realize, is that, I have to take a lot more responsibilities, or rather a lot more responsibility in what I do, and just be keen on my my approach to the art form.
Yeah.
Poetry is something that I've always studied. I went to Black Studies before. I try to do my best to focus on the importance of my experience and connection with other people. And so, and I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, okay. I was just thinking, as you were saying that, I'm thinking like, so when you realize how good you are, right? When you realize, man, I really have a talent, and you're able to speak with emotion, and you're writing this stuff down. I mean, how does that make you feel when you kind of get it out? Do you feel like you're getting it out on paper and you feel better, like the result of that? Or do you feel like you still have a position of holding on to something? So as you're writing, like, what are you feeling?
I don't feel like it all belongs to me. I don't feel like it's something that I'm like, okay, look, this is what I have. This is what I'm giving. Because I believe in earth. I've always have. I always believe in earth. I definitely believe in God. And in my interpretation of things, I think about the reception process, but also the perception process. And so one of the main things I don't try to write for is just the common ear. I try to write for the soul. And so it's difficult. It's not something that you can just say, okay, I'm about to put out a poem. I'm about to go. It's just like, I'm about to get in the car, go to the club. You get to the club. I don't really want to dance. I just wanted to be here and drink a drink.
Right.
You're not going to have a good time.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to say, hey, look, this is everything that I needed. Once I get there and say, hey, look, I'm having a great time. This is perfect for me. And you might mean well, but intention, that's the main thing. I mean, I think about the intent that I put into my first book. It was crazy. My first book, my wife was working every day. She was a nurse. I have a 7-year-old daughter.
Nice.
Her name is Sanaa. She's the star of my life. Right. When I think about my daughter, she every day as I was producing my book, we would practice yoga.
Okay.
We would work out. We would do Tai Chi. We would learn about recycling. And one of the main inspirations that I've had was that I needed her to know that no matter what, she had a voice. She had a speaking platform. She had the ability to say how she felt regardless of idea or regardless of concept. And so that's one of the main things. I mean, obviously there's, tons of stuff that can hold a person back.
Right.
I grew up on peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Yes, I did a pancake mix. I was like, if I have another pancake, yikes,
Right.
So yeah, you obviously grew up a type of way, and so that kind of morphs over a little bit. So explain a little bit about your background as far as growing up.
It was difficult. My grandmother's from Mississippi. She was a farmer.
Okay.
She was a farmer. She's a very tough woman. She was very focused. My father married my mom. my mother is a superhero in
No
CNA
small guy.
clothing.
Right.
She's taught me so much about patience. She taught me so much about just focusing my mind, being truthful to what I want to become, being truthful to who I am, regardless of any situation. Because one of the main things that I've seen, I actually had an opportunity to work with her,
Nice.
and as I worked with her, I had a opportunity to meet many of the people who she had worked with, and these people were elderly people. These people were people who had lived their lives, who had.
They have some of the best stories,
They-
right? They have some
right.
of the best just concepts of life.
Absolutely.
The wisdom and the structure of what they've gone through. And you can learn a lot from a person
Absolutely.
who's lived 80 plus years, So, yeah. So what did you learn maybe in that process of being around the people that she worked with?
Well, one of the main things that I learned was just that, when they're telling you something, and when they're trying to get you to do something, how to digest what they're saying. And it was difficult at first because I was very, very young. But I also learned that the good that she had did just was something that they truly appreciated. You know what I mean? It wasn't something it wasn't something that they could talk to people about, but they showed it, and I remember my older sister telling me, "Hey, look, Vincent, mom worked inside a convalescent home for 25 years. We got angels." You know what I mean? That's
very nice.
It's been something that's encouraged me. I've grown up in Long Beach, California. I went to high school during a time where they had, gang riots. Gang riots right at school. I remember walking down the street, and my brother Jermaine was simply associated with one of the gangs, and one of the people who I call cousin was walking down the street and seeing me and say, "Vincent, we got to help him run down the street." And I've always been kind of oblivious to the world. I've always been kind of separate from what was going on, living in my own world. And they were just like, "Yeah, man, we got to run down the street because it's people coming to try to get us because we know Jermaine." And I'm just like, my brother, even though we all make mistakes, has never done any. One of the main things we say is he's never killed nobody. So he's never done anything to really truly hurt anybody. And it was one of the main things that I do realize from going to high school is that we live in a time period as Generation Z that is or Generation X rather, that is suffering from the ramifications of the baby boomers who basically were focused on themselves. They were focused on themselves. They were focused on their feelings. They were focused on their intent. It really hit me kind of hard. In 10th grade, I had I'll tell you the whole story. I was in Mississippi. We moved in Mississippi. So I lived in Mississippi. It was Texas. I was in Texas. Sorry about that. Mm-hmm. And we lived in one of the wards. And so one of the wards in Texas is kind of just one of the most rundown areas, one of the most poorest areas. And my sister didn't really get all her credits for graduating high school. So because she didn't get all her credits for graduating high school, what she ended up doing was going to one of the accredited schools where they give you more credits. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so as she got more credits, I had to go to the school with her just to keep her safe and, watch out for her. I remember one of the first days that we went there, these guys was talking to her, and I had to tell them to leave her alone. But when we got to the school, that on that same bus ride, the entire parking lot was covered with individuals standing outside with their shirts off trying to fight because of a gang war. And we didn't pay it too much attention. We were just like, well, that's crazy. And so we went to school that day. And so when we went to school that day, my sister was going to be singing inside of a talent contest. And so I decided to join the talent contest. So I read this poem called Generation X. And Generation X was a poem speaking about our generation and how much responsibility we had on us.
Now, this wasn't a poem that you wrote. This is just a poem that you are familiar with.
This was a poem that I wrote.
Oh, so you did write it. Okay, so this started very early on.
Yes.
Through experiences, through things that are happening.
Absolutely.
You're moving, you're, with your mom, you're with your sister, you're doing all this stuff. And so you've been inspired by different movements to create the poetry in you.
Absolutely.
So you're now in this position, you're doing your poetry. Go ahead.
Yes. And one of the crazy things I can say about that is I got married at 19. Okay. I got married at 19. So my wife, when she first met me, one of the main things I did for her was write her poetry, obviously. Right. It was like, hey, I'm going to be as...
Nice gestures.
Of course. I mean, notes. Flowers, poetry, as best as I can do.
Right.
And it was difficult because as time went on and we had problems and different things like that, when I came to the book that I was going to write, I found myself sitting inside the living room. I was there alone. I had complete silence. Mm-hmm. I remember feeling aches and pains and feeling terrible, but realizing that I had a calling to write the book. I actually got a Bible reading. So I got a Bible reading. My sister believes in Jah. So I got a Bible reading. When I got the Bible reading, what I decided to do was kind of sit myself down. The initial Bible reading said that I'm going to open up a restaurant. So I watched some videos and I was trying to do my own research and trying to figure out, hey, look, how do I connect with my ancestors? How do I, find my root in what I'm doing? And one of the main things that I ended up doing was realizing that it wasn't about power. It wasn't about trying to get an advantage at all. It was actually about trying to see what the good that I could receive and the good that I can also give. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't give the good because I was locked up. It was like, oh, okay, I have all these things I need to try to do. I remember it being dead silent. I remember doing meditation. I remember, just feeling like I have to get this done. The Bible reading was interesting because my ancestor said that, where's your book? I do remember that. She asked me, where's your book? Somebody told, I think it was my sister. She said, they asked, where's your book? And I said, they said, you're supposed to write a book. Where's your book? Mm-hmm. So I'm sitting down and I'm at my place in Portland with my ex-wife, and I said, hey, listen, I'm going to write a book. Okay. And so when I said I'm going to write a book, she's a nurse, so she's very technical. So she said, hey, look, yeah, that sounds good. You need to go ahead and do it. So the first day she comes home and she's just like, so what are you doing? I said, I already have the first couple of poems written, and I'm looking for people online who might want to write a book of poetry with me. Mm-hmm. The interesting part about it is one of my old friends from California, her name is Daisy Bjorquez, and Daisy Bjorquez is from the Dominican Republic. Mm-hmm. And she's one of the coolest people that I know. She was suffering from mental health way before I was, or from a mental health issue way before I was. And she was just going through problems, and she was just like, man, this is difficult. I don't know why I'm having these problems. We both went to the same church. And it was just like, hey, Vince, I'm an artist. I know you're an artist. We need to connect. So we connected on Instagram. And so on Instagram, it was kind of crazy because when I all of a sudden had all this energy. I was studying. I was trying to do, mantras. I wasn't just trying to do any type of poetry. I was trying to do poetry that was going to inspire people, something that they could wake up every morning and read the poem.
Mm-hmm.
And after they read that poem, they were just like, hey, look, this poem is actually making me feel better.
Okay.
Years later, up here in Portland, I ended up doing some door-to-door book sales, poetry book sales. And as I did these poetry book sales, it was crazy because I remember this one girl. She walked up and she was crying. She was having like a bad day. I said, "Hey, listen, read my book." And then she messaged me on Instagram, and she was just like, "Oh my goodness, that was a really good book, and I like your mantras." And one of the main things I told her is that it's something that you should read every morning. It was almost like my spiritual calling was telling me, "Hey, look, these people, these ideas, these concepts was the right direction."
Mm-hmm.
This person who I worked with, who was very, 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 very kind to me, and she was also very, very ambitious. Her name is Sabrina Eden. Sabrina Eden got with me, and she was just like, "Vince, this book is amazing. I can't wait to start doing all these pictures. I have these pictures, ideas, and I want to write some poetry." So my concept was like, "Hey, listen, what we're going to do is we're going to share our poetry via candlelight." And
So at this point, you have a collaboration of other people.
I
So is Daisy in the group at this point? This other person. So
yes.
now you're starting to kind of bring people in.
Absolutely.
To this.
So
Okay.
So it's Daisy. She was suffering with mental health, and what I did was I put out a banner. I said, "Hey, listen to Instagram. If it's anybody who wants to write poetry, I'm suffering from mental health. I'm putting a book together." Surprisingly, they attracted to me like magnets. It wasn't something I had to wait
You
for.
realize that people really are going through some stuff,
And
right?
that's the crazy
and they keep
part.
it inside, right? This is how we kind of do things. This is the human nature. Mainly more in men, right? Men kind of seem to, harden that part. They don't want to talk about things. They don't feel like they have anybody that they can, relate with. They don't want to be judged, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's all these different things. And so when you have somebody who's opening that up
Mm-hmm.
and you see, wow, a lot of people are suffering, men and women.
Absolutely.
This is a platform I'm going to give you to share what you're going through. Now, at this point, you and your wife are still together.
Yes.
Okay, so we have you guys together. You've written this book. Now, is this the first book that we're talking about tonight? The Suicide Notes?
This is the Suicide Notes.
Okay, so let me ask you a question about that, because suicide in itself is a very icky word, right? Nobody likes to think that, to talk about that. That's why it is a taboo, and we got to break that silence. We got to get people to open up so they don't have those thoughts.
Absolutely.
But what made you come up with the title first, real quick? What was that? What was the Suicide Note title for?
One of the main things I did before anything, I believe in testing the food out. That's my concept. It's like my grandmother is an amazing cook, and so I'm always like, "Hey, look, I'm going to, try it,
Right.
eat some. If it tastes great, then we're going to go that direction. I don't want to just say, hey, look, this is my idea. We're going to put it all together." So when I got together, I said, "Hey, listen, guys, what I want is amazing energy." I'm the CEO. I constructed the group.
Mm-hmm.
I told all the individuals inside the group, "Hey, listen, you guys bring your energy, whatever it is, whether it's sad, good, bad, up, down, bring your energy and tell how you feel openly."
Mm-hmm.
Now, these individuals who are working with me, Daisy Bjorquez, Sabrina Eden, Spencer Ross, and Mboku, I forget her last name. Mbunku, that's her name. She's from Nigeria.
Okay.
It's interesting. I remember one of her first texts. We were having some arguments, and we were just like, "Man, I got this poem, and this poem is dope, and I'm having some hard time writing, and I don't believe we should do it this way." And I said to Sabrina, because she's one of the main people who was helping orchestrate the pictures for the book.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? However your delivery comes to you, do it that way. I'm a solid, firm.
Because that could have been her talent, right? The way that she articulates emotion and feelings and stuff. So everybody's different.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you opened that to her to say, just write whatever.
Yes, and one of the sad things about her situation is she was suffering from breakup with her boyfriend. She had a photographer who she used to work for who took advantage of her and didn't pay her for her work. And so one of the main things she was communicating to me is just how difficult it was for her to open up and to be just in open book the way that we were on the book. Or
Like vulnerable?
vulnerable, absolutely.
Right.
Sorry about
That's
that.
a tough one. Yeah, I think a lot of people struggle with that. You know, to be open, to be transparent, to be vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Right. That's a scary place, but when you do it in a way where you realize, okay, it's going to help somebody, or they're going to break free from those traumas and those things, it can do amazing things by being transparent and vulnerable. Right now, you see the work in helping other people.
That's 100%. You know what? She took a leap. She trusted the way that I was guiding, and it wasn't just for her. It was for the entire group. One of the main things is, Mbuku's poetry was written from her in English, but it was a translation from Nigerian.
Okay.
So she was communicating how she felt, and so one of the main things I didn't want to do is tell individuals, "Hey, look, this is a hard, fast, set rule, especially on something so sensitive like the suicide notes." Mm-hmm. Every person in the group had their own dealing with actual suicide. They had their own experience with mental health.
Okay, so in that retrospect, so suicide, there's different layers, right? So there's the contemplation. Right. So some people obviously just think about it. They know, okay, that's not what I want to do. Then you have people who really internalize that. And like you said, it kind of builds into the mental health part of things. Like they really struggle with the depression and the anxiety and all that other stuff that can lead into those thoughts.
Right.
And then you have the ones that really think and do.
Right.
It's kind of a crazy story. Just real quick, I had a gentleman the other night. I was suiting him at Elevate Him, and he had asked me, how'd you get started? Like, what's all this? This is so cool. And he brought his kids with him. So I was like, oh, yeah, this is my brother. I had a picture of my brother on my desk.
Right.
I kind of just gave him a backstory. And I could tell, because he instantly was like, man, my friend did that 12 years ago. And he goes, and I still haven't really recovered from that, right? Because you just don't. I don't know anybody who's ever recovered from losing somebody that way.
Right.
And he, I said, yeah, it's very tough. And he starts choking up, like he starts feeling like he's going to, get very emotional. And he goes, you know what, if it wasn't for them, and he pointed at the kids. And it was sad, because it's like we've all been in that dark place.
Right.
But that's the only thing that's saving him was the kids.
Right.
And so it made me just kind of feel like, damn, there's a lot of people hurting for different reasons, breakups, divorces, loss of a loved one, just their own, feeling about themselves.
Absolutely.
They feel judged, they feel outcasted, all these things. And so, there's different layers to suicide. So as you're working with your team and you're kind of collecting the data, everybody is struggling with some form of that thought.
Absolutely.
Right? That depression. So were you yourself in any point in that time ever thought of suicide?
That's an interesting question. It's not something I talk to people about often, but I will disclose that. So I would say probably a month before I had the idea to write the book, I was sleeping every day. I was in bed. I wasn't getting out of bed. I would watch cartoons in my bed with my daughter all day long. And one of the main thoughts that I had was suicide. So I got out of bed, and it was snowing in Oregon, and I walked to the side of the freeway, and I sat in the snow and fell asleep. So,
damn.
Yes. So,
that just like that was your way out? That you just felt that was it for you?
You know what? It was a little bit too much on my plate. It was something that I wasn't communicating with anybody. I had very, very, very dark thoughts, obviously, and it was just it was difficult. It was difficult. It wasn't something that I can say that it was the best decision, because after I did that, I got up, I walked back inside the house. I had written a suicide note. and I ended up telling my wife what I did, and she was just like, "Hey, listen, you need to go talk to a psychiatrist, something like that, and get your life together, start taking medication." And it was difficult for me, but one of the main things that I was able to do was just to start to reason a little bit better, because regardless of if I wasn't willing to live for my life, I was.
You had a baby girl.
Yes, of course I was trying to live for her, and that's when I made those transitions. I started to get the book together. I started to get people on a focused track who were also suffering.
Yeah.
I remember when me and Sabrina did the end of the book, when we started to talk about what we were going to write at the end of the book, and we did the numbers, and we was just like astounded by the numbers. The amount of people who commit suicide is way more higher than the actual death rate.
Yeah.
I mean, not the death rate, the murder rate. And so it's like all these people who are suffering silently, all these people who are not communicating. Poetry was one of the main things that drove us. I know Daisy. She did this poem where she was crying. She was pouring her heart out. And all the poems are on YouTube. They're on the Lost Poets YouTube page, and you can go and just check out all the poems via candlelight. And she's expressing herself, and she's crying. She's talking about her own experience. And I remember a time where we were sitting inside the living room in Long Beach, California, and we were just like, "Hey, man, this is one of the best times." I made Jello shots for everybody, and we were all dancing around and having a good time. And it was just like, man, this is one of the best, I would say, engagements that we've had. And even at that time, I think she was taking give me a second. Right, I want to say the right word.
Yeah.
Medication for bipolar disorder.
Okay.
And so because she was taking medication for bipolar disorder, she was, a little more reserved. And many times people don't realize why a person might be a little bit more reserved. But it's many times because what I've known about her is she had some bad experiences.
Like traumas.
Traumas.
Yeah.
Sabrina had bad experiences. Spencer came to me as a young man, and he was just like, "Hey, man, I've read some of your poetry, and I'm really astounded by it, but I don't understand why you make your line breaks the way that you make them, and I don't understand, what drives your poetry. It's almost like you already want a person to feel a certain way at the end of the poem." And so I told him he's going to be the youngest poet on the book, but what I ended up doing is telling him to read some verses from the book of Proverbs. So he read the verses, and he was just like, "I understand what you mean now," because it's almost like when a person's reading my poetry, I can communicate myself in a way that's more effective if I not copy, but follow that
The traditional.
Right. The traditional format. And that's just what was best for him. I mean, it's all different types of poetry out there. I ended up writing mantras, and I communicated the fact that they were mantras. Not necessarily trying to do magic, but just having a person repurpose an idea inside their head so many times that they actually start to internalize it. And it's been a process, but one of the things I want to do before we cut the show, I'm not sure how much.
Yeah, well, we got a little bit more time, but for sure, yeah.
Okay, I wanted to read, if my phone is not dead, I wanted to read a couple of my poems from my upcoming book, Artists.
Okay, so let's go from that. So here you guys, you're celebrating, you finished the book.
Right.
Everybody's kind of like, wow, we did this. We went through some stuff.
Sorry about that.
And here you guys are celebrating the book. It's out, right? So we can find your book where for the Suicide Notebook?
So you can go to Amazon.com.
Okay.
And then you can look up Vincent Joseph Osborne III, and you can also look up The Lost Poet Suicide Notes. And that's the first book.
Okay. So that's the first one. So as you're now kind of going, wow, this is definitely a passion. This is making me feel better. Life is still kind of transitioned, right?
Absolutely.
So at this point, now you are divorced, right? So life is still happening, but you are still putting yourself in a position of healing. You're putting your position into, your passion, and it's actually changed your mind, I'm assuming, at this point in life.
Right.
So where are you now, like with your, your depression and what you were going through before? Like, where are you? I mean, every day is a struggle for everybody, so it's not a cakewalk. I get that.
Right.
People are always, but when I say that, because the research I've done when it comes to suicide and depression, stuff like that, men suffer 3 times, sometimes even 4 times than women. Right. And so that's what really made me think, well, I got to do something. I got to create resources. I got to create support for men, because we're losing them at a fast rate. And like I've said before, if it was anything else that had to do with women, breast cancer, right, we would be on top of it. We would be doing the most to get women the support and fundraising. But here we don't really tap into that when it comes to suicide, plus it being male driven. More men are doing this. And because I feel like there is that hope, they don't have the support, there's a lot of double standards in this world. Right. There's a lot of demasculating, like we talked about prior. There's things that are happening to men that have just allowed them to feel like, screw it. What am I here for? What am I doing? Like, if it wasn't for my kids. And that's sad, because as a man and you're struggling with certain things, like, right, this is a real serious issue. So as you're doing that, and again, like, we know that it's not a cakewalk. Every day we have to struggle with our battles and stuff like that. But where do you feel like you're obviously in a better place? And the writing, the poetry, and the books have allowed you to free yourself from your thoughts like that.
Well, that's one of the main things I do want to be able to talk about is just before my experience after I got divorced, I had a mindset. It was of a younger man. I got married young, but I had a mindset that was central focused. That was not as perceiving as I wanted it to be, and so I ended up learning through some very, very, very decent people, some very, very decent women rather, who had took interest in me and said, "Hey, listen, we understand what you're going through. I want you to know that the people who focused on you before are not just there focusing on you because they want something from you." And initially, I remember when it dawned on me, I had this idea of resilience. I was like, hey, look, I need to be resilient. I need to be strong enough to continue to proceed forward in order to protect and to provide and to help these people. Every man, probably, I would say any good man would need to or thinks that way, mm-hmm. says, hey, listen, I want to be the protector, the provider. But one of the main things is I wasn't necessarily taught how to display weakness from my father. So it's not something that I'm very grateful to him for that. Mm-hmm. I'm very grateful to him for being a strong pillar in my family. But it's something that I regret that my ex-wife didn't have a chance to see, because I do appreciate everything that I learned throughout that process. It was a very difficult process. Mm-hmm. I was homeless. I was on the street. I was sleeping outside. I was sick. I was in pain. I didn't have shoes on. I went through crazy processes where I lost everything. I didn't have any clothes, and it was not something I had ever experienced in my life before. Mm. I ended up in jail 16 times, and I didn't commit any crimes. I was a position in my life that I had basically went out on this path trying to find what I needed in order to validate myself, realizing after the fact that the things that I had and the people who were around me were already giving me validation. Mm-hmm. And it was a sore spot for me initially when I was going through it. I couldn't understand everything, But as I got to the end of it and I was starting to make better decisions, I remember coming up on the idea for my third book. I had come up with two ideas. The first idea was no nose. And the second idea was ortis. And ortis is a Latin word for rise. Mm. And so the concept for ortis was an idea that that I wanted people to realize within themselves that even if you are going through problems, or even if you have some sort of pain that you're dealing with, it's not necessarily just for people who are dealing with completely dark thoughts or morbid issues. Mm-hmm. It's for people who wake up in the morning time and say, hey, look, it's a difficult process for me. It's kind of hard for me to get my thoughts together for today. I need something to go with my orange juice. Mm-hmm. And so that concept is something that I went beyond, or rather above and beyond, to try to get as many of the previous authors that I had involved with. Right now it's just me and Daisy. Okay. So
this is just for the third book, you two.
Right.
So there was a book in between.
Yes.
And then that was kind of still with some of the same people, the same concept.
Absolutely.
Driven by poetry.
Yes.
Now we're on the third book. Dang, he's just on a mission. Tearing it up with the books.
Absolutely.
So now you're on your third book with just two of you, mm-hmm. but still the same heart, the same passion, the same things that are driven to poetry, of experiences and stuff like that. Really quick, where do you see like your next step? Because you're making these steps. You shared a lot tonight about just the street, the hurt, obviously the bringing up, as far as just a child and what you see and what you go through. But you've made these steps and look at you. You've accomplished 3 books.
Right.
You seem like you are still feeling good about life. You're in a good place. Right. Again, we have our days, but like you said, something that can go with your orange juice. That's really cute. I like that. But, it's a simpler reminder. Do you go back and kind of read your books as just like a hey, I need to kind of check in with myself?
What I do sometimes is I go back and I read the other authors' poems. Okay. I'm tremendously grateful. Just recently I was able to do payroll. Okay. And I did payroll and I paid everybody, and I was just like,
everybody did pay.
I was just like, man,
cool.
It's not a ton of money. Authors have to really do their best to make the ballpoint pen meet the paper on that, and it's difficult, but I appreciate the passion that went into it. It was so much love amongst all of us. Every day we would get together and we would be writing to each other and would say, hey, what do you think about this poem? What do you think about that poem? We would have these conversations and be talking to each other. And I remember when Sabrina Eden did those photos, and these photos are so dope. The first picture that she sent me was a picture of a tree with an apple on it. Mm-hmm. And so one of the concepts that I was studying in spirituality was the seed. And it was just like, oh man, these new concepts came to me. It wasn't something I grew up with, but it was an idea to realize how important Mother Earth is. Mm-hmm. And so we took that picture, and it's on the front of the book, the apple with the tree. Mm-hmm. And it's very, 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 very dope because it was all about organics. It's all about the beginning, the natural process. And so the readers have an opportunity to see what was really inside of our intent, inside of our mind when they put the book together, when they accept the book. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One of the main things is, or when they get the book, one of the main things that I can say is, all of the participants realized what they were doing. It was like Spencer would hit me up and say, hey man, I got like 5 new poems and I can't believe I'm actually writing this much. So about 2 years in, after the first book was completely finished, I did instructional videos. And I said, hey, look, everybody, we got to get together. We're going to go out and make some money. And it was interesting because I hadn't made that much money from Amazon. It was only like a couple $100. And I was like, man, I'm struggling, but I need to make some money. So I get together and I go up to Tigard. And in Tigard, I'm out and I'm like, hey, look, I'm going to put a suit on and I'm going to,
Oh, a suit. Would you imagine that?
Right. a professional image as best as possible. And right. I put it together and I'm just like, hey, look, you guys, I want you to copy this process. So I go over to New Seasons and I talk to some of the store managers and just like, hey, listen, you can set up here and it's, it's a pretty cool process. And, I'm loving, the setup. I go out there. I put about 30, 40 books out there. I make about $800. And I tell my team that, and they're just like, whoa, so that's something that Daisy, she actually took to. Not everybody was able to do the same thing, but Daisy went right into it and started to do her own thing and started making some decent money. And it was a godsend. It was something to really realize that we took our time. I remember sitting up, it was like 3 or 4 nights back to back trying to figure out how to publish a book, and just my head messing with me and I'm in complete silence. And I remember the pain that I actually put into putting the book together. And it was difficult. It was just like, I didn't want to give up. I knew I had to do it. But at the end of the process, three revisions, having an editor, two people edit, and then putting the book together after all of that, just saying, hey, look, I finally put together some sort of piece of artwork that I can give to the world. After that, I ended up on the street. And when I was on the street, I had an elderly woman ask me, what can you be remembered by? And I told her, oh, I've actually written a book. And she was just like, so we have an author. And it was memorable for me, not because it was just her trying to give me the accreditation or the praise. It was something that I had to remember myself, that when you sit down and you actually put your heart and soul into something, the world will receive it. And it was beautiful for me. It was beautiful for our group. This next book that I want to talk about the second book. Sorry about that. I want to talk about the second book. The second book is completely dope. I don't want to skip over it. It's written by Salim Coyote Mbuku. And I forget one of my writers' names. It's kind of hard to pronounce. It's like Aganji Anda or something like that. But it's a group of individuals who got together, and it's fierce. It's like we are fighting. We wanted people to know what our experience was in 2019, being Black from all over the world. So one of the cool things is it's not just being Black from Africa or being Black from America. Yeah. I wouldn't say poor. One of the writers is he's a I can't think of the word. He's a engineer.
Okay.
He's an engineer, and Coyote went to a academy, and she has awards, and Agun, it's hard for me to pronounce his name. I can't think of it. But he one of the other writers, he also has awards, and he's a very laid back guy, and it's very, very, very cool because all these writers brought all these different types of artwork. It was artwork from all over the world. I put some very dope, very hip hop, very, very I would say just archaic style stunt um just realness. You know what I mean? I don't have a better way to explain it than that.
We'll just have to check the book out, right? Right. You're just like, let's go get the book.
Absolutely. Okay. Please check out the book. It's called Black in 2019 by the Lost Poets. It's also part of the conglomerate. The Lost Poets is the conglomerate on YouTube. Is also the conglomerate on Amazon. So you can check out both, and it's also going to be the Lost Poets artists.
So it's all kind of collaborated with the first book as well, yes. So we can find it all at the same spot.
Absolutely.
Now, is the third book the same way? So we can find. Well, you're not even done with the third book.
So I'm actually about halfway done with the third book.
Okay.
I don't
so
have.
We'll stay tuned for book 3, but again, that'll probably be the same platform. So everything that you are writing and putting out there will be on those. The Amazon and the Lost Poets and all that stuff. So you are keeping it all tied in together so we can easily find your books.
Absolutely. And that's one of the most important things. I try not to I try not to steer people away from the general theme of poetry, the general theme of the Lost Poets. Every poet inside the group is completely on their own. They have their
own identity.
Their own identity, their own brand, you know, and it's about 15 to 20 poems from each poet in each book. Or maybe a little bit more. And it's something that if you want a variety, one of the main things I thought about when I was putting the book together is I can write a whole book of poetry by myself and say, hey, look, this is all my poems, and you know, trying to make them as diverse as possible. But I wanted something where a person can say, hey, I'm going to an open mic or poetry night and say, look, I can just pull this book out and read this poem that I identify with me and that spoke for me. And when it spoke for me, what the message to the people was, because the streamline is what I was worried about from day one. It wasn't something that I was like, okay, well, I just want to be able to write this poem and then people buy it and say, hey, that was a good poem.
Right.
Sabrina Eden had this concept. And so the back of the book of The Lost Poet Suicide Notes, the first book, it was dope. It was like, hey, listen, we're writing this book. We're trying to reach out to. We're going to donate 10% of the proceeds to NAMI, and we're trying to reach out to as many people who have their own experience with suicide as possible. One of the main things that we want to do as a group is donate. I would say not only 10%, but also take the money from the 10% and put. Not only 10% of all the proceeds, but take the money from that 10% of the proceeds and buy books and donate them directly to high schools, because young people are dealing with mental health issues and different things like that they don't speak of. And so she was completely adamant about it. She went to some open mic poetry nights and she shared her own poems. What is it called? I cannot think of the something realism, but the poem that she shares on YouTube, you can, if you buy the book, you can read along with it, and it is very, 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 very dope. She's pouring her heart out. She's communicating, and it's pure art. It's like one of the main things is that you're able to actually hear the poem read directly from the artist.
Right.
After it's read from the artist.
Because they can really articulate the emotion. Right. They can really say it how it is. And when it's heard that way, it's going to be perceived in the way that they're delivering it.
Absolutely.
Which is very heartfelt, very moving, very passionate. So that's a very nice way to, conduct the Audible type move with that. Plus, that's pretty, do you plan on doing maybe an Audible with your books? Because I know that's a pretty popular thing right now. I mean, I love books, so I'm all about it. But I do have a lazy side. I don't always pick one up. I definitely will put it on, the Audible, go for a drive, in my spare time at the gym, whatever, I have a chance to listen to it. Because I feel like that is a very good balance when somebody's writing, that you hear how they want to perceive that and put that out. Right. So is that an option, just real quick?
Well, to be honest, it is something that I was thinking about. Yeah. I was thinking about putting together. We have it in an Audible book, but we do have, for the Lost Poet Suicide Notes, a digital version.
Okay, cool. Yeah, very nice. Yeah, because that would be definitely, the new move. So just real quick as we wrap up, I just want to see if you can get one of the poems up. You were kind of checking that out. And then just moving forward with what you got going on, I want you to share with the viewers again one more time on where they can find your books, and just what you see for yourself moving forward, and the fact that you're helping people through poetry, through similar situations, through pain, through struggle, just what your next move is on that.
One of my next move is to put out Ortis. Ortis is intended to inspire light. As I put these books out, my main concept is just the whole theme of the entire book and what each person can receive from it. So it's meant to inspire light. It's meant to be able to help out each individual for what they want to accomplish in a positive way. Mm-hmm. I actually told all the poets who were with me and Daisy, and we had a couple other people who were interested, but they haven't come together yet. Mm-hmm. But I actually told Daisy, hey, listen, what we want to do is we want to inspire light in the universe. Ultimately, we want to inspire light in as many people as possible. She's already put together 20 poems. I'm on about 30. So it will be coming out in probably about, it's going to be probably early January, where they should look out for the book.
The new year. Right?
Yes.
New book, new year. All
absolutely.
Right. Cool.
And it's a very dope book. It has 1920 style jazz pictures in it.
Okay.
I'm an artist myself, and so one of the main things that I did was I did some computer graphics on some of the paintings that I put together. It has the themes are already laid out to just kind of link together. And one of the poems that I want to be able to share from the book, I am going to bring it up in just a second. So maybe not. My phone is not charged.
Oh, no. Dang.
It's okay. It's okay. Sorry about that. That is completely on me. I apologize.
No, it's all good. No, I want people to get your book, and I'm really excited to get a copy myself, because I love the fact that you've taken pain, you've turned it into something. Mm-hmm. That's kind of like how I started. I took the pain of losing my brother, and I created something so special that I know that I was put in position to do. And I was terrified, right? You're terrified because you're being vulnerable. You're putting it all out there. You're putting your story out there. You're putting, all this time and wondering, like, how's this going to work? And I remember, kind of going through my own transitions, and I was having a bad day. I'm struggling. I'm like, damn, what am I doing? And it was basically what popped in my head that I had seen was, if God gave you the purpose for the business, he's going to bring the clients.
Right.
So if he brought you the purpose for your story, your emotions, where you are in your dark place and even in your good places,
absolutely,
he's going to bring the readers, right?
Amen.
He's going to transform lives based off of your story and your writing. So I'm super excited to even, be reading what you put out. So everybody, I really hope you get plugged in with his books. He has the third one coming out early next year.
January.
So we're going to have him rehearse real quick how we can find your book and all that good stuff.
Okay, sounds good. So Amazon.com, Vincent Joseph Osborne III, The Lost Poets. It's a conglomerate, so you can just look for The Lost Poets. The Lost Poets Suicide Notes, The Lost Poets Black in 2019, and also The Lost Poets artist that's going to be coming out in January.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So I really appreciate you coming on. It's so inspiring that, again, taking that pain into power, anybody can do it. It's tough times right now. We are in 2021. We're in a pandemic. All this craziness is happening. We just hope that, everybody come together. We love one another, show love, be kind, all that good stuff. So thank you so much for coming on tonight. I appreciate you. We'll talk in a minute. But everybody else, thank you so much for tapping in. We'll check you next time.
Thank you.
Hey, what's up? It's Nicole Brewster, also known as Coco. Thank you for tapping into the Elevate Him podcast. Until next time.